This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from People Forward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self. Hey, everyone. I am just going to forewarn you that this is going to be one of those episodes you might want to go back and listen to again when you either can take notes on your phone or on your computer, or if you have something handy nearby that you jot down notes on, because there's so many fast-moving, tangible nuggets and questions and things that can help you show up more effectively, show up as a leader, and transform yourselves and show up as extraordinary. I had the pleasure of having this conversation with David Gorsage. He is a performance coach, he is a leadership development expert, and he is a speaker, and he is just all around an amazing human being who works with leaders to help them get to the next level of them that is just full of amazing wisdom. And he talks about, first and foremost, that in this day and age, this old idea of good to great doesn't cut it anymore, that we have to look at incremental steps that we can take to be extraordinary. And that's a theme that runs through this conversation. It doesn't have to be overwhelming, but it starts with ourselves. So he gives a lot of great, tangible things we can do incrementally to get rid of what he calls our head trash and to start to show up as extraordinary. He talks about the performance triangle or triad that helps us do that. He talks about how we get more candid and real with ourselves to help us on that journey to extraordinary. And then we start to transition into how do we do this if you are a leader of teams, if you are in a workplace, how do we start to bring this to a team atmosphere and really create that environment where the team can now be extraordinary. And he gives 4 key questions that we can ask our team members to help draw out that extraordinary. Again, lots of great nuggets you're going to want to listen for that are going to help you kick off this year and beyond to become an extraordinary version of yourself. Well, David, I am super excited to have a geek out session with you today. I think this is going to be very, very timely. And anyone that's been around in the work world for a long time is probably familiar with Jim Collins' Good to Great. And people use that a lot, whether they've read the book or not. And I want to just dive right in because one of the things that you are passionate about and talking about is that it is no longer good enough to be great, that great doesn't cut it. Can you say more?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think because, we are just inundated with massive amounts of information, the technology trend has actually even more than overtaken us in our society, obviously in our businesses. There's a lot of noise out there. You're able to get information so much more quickly. Look at ChatGPT. When you look at the ability to have AI influence your thoughts, your presentation. Then you look at competition, the amount of competition today, and the speed that we move in business today. This is where what Jim Collins wrote was so pivotal, but yet today, it's no longer going to cut it. We have to look at the small, minute, little things, the details to be extraordinary. It's those little steps, those little increments, those little wins that are going to create the extraordinary, whether it be in our companies, in our leadership, in our families. And this is where we as a society going into 2024 now, being in it, is we need to focus on. It's about becoming extraordinary.
Love all of that. And some people might be like, whoo, like I'm just, treading water. I'm on the struggle bus. I've had a hard enough time moving to great. How are you defining extraordinary and what does that actually look like?
That's a great way to begin this because really I think it belongs into internalizing who we are as an individual. It starts with us in who I am, how I interact with my coworkers, with my leadership staff, with my family, with my friends, and frankly, anyone today. The relationship element is so much more important now to keep the humanization, and that extraordinary step starts with yourself and really starting to become that better version of yourself every day. That's where the extraordinary starts.
I love how you're defining that, right? Because I think people can think about extraordinary as going above and beyond or those things. And what I love about what you just shared, and I don't know if you realize this or not, but with this show being called Show Up as a Leader, our definition of leadership is maximizing our positive impact on the world by becoming our best, fully authentic self and supporting those around us to break past barriers and step into their greatness. And so really what you're describing, what I'm hearing is that this idea of becoming extraordinary is it starts with us and every one of us finding that opportunity to show up as a leader, to show up as a better version of ourselves in each and every interaction. Is that fair to make that correlation?
Yes.
Okay, so it is no longer okay to just sit back and wait for someone else more qualified, right? Basically, we can't be just great. We have to all show up as leaders. We all have to take those steps. So talk to us then, what are some of those pivotal incremental steps that you have found that we as individuals can take to show up as leader, or in your language, to show up more extraordinary?
I'm a performance coach. A performance coach is a little bit different than an executive coach, a little bit different than a life coach. A performance coach looks at where you currently sit within the 6 major roles you play in your life. And we look at what are the incremental steps that we can make. I'm going to answer your question, but I need to kind of step back and say, we all have roles in our life, and the 6 major ones that really influence our performance. Because what I find with executive women especially, and I work with a lot of high-performing executive women, this is where they become paralyzed, or at least they become hindered in their performance because they have this cloud. And that's probably a bad characterization of what it is. There's this cloud of how they are underperforming in other roles of their life, as a mother, as a sister, as a spouse, because they see how they're performing in their work. There's a lot of very easy metrics that can help us understand how we are performing in our role and in our work as a leader. But when it comes to these other roles, this is where they get paralyzed or become hindered in achieving elite performance. So when you look at elite performance, it's really, think of it as a triangle. The bottom left-hand part of that triangle is going to be behavior. What are the things I need to do to become an elite performer, or to just be a better performer next day? The bottom right-hand side is skills and knowledge. Now, we're always trying to elevate our skills and knowledge of what we do and how we perform in a role at work or as a leader. But this is where we're going to touch on in a minute, how we need to perform, or the skills and knowledge of those other roles in our life. Because at the very apex of that is mindset. This is where we all typically fail because there's so much deep-seatedness. Let's face it, we're all wounded units out there. And the wounded units that we are is what's hindering us from elevating the mindset from what we could call just the self-limiting records in our head. We try to work so much on the behaviors and the skills and knowledge, we forget the mindset, but that's where we need to really begin, is in the mindset.
You're speaking my language, because this is the work we do every day, right? If we don't start with that mindset, as we know, shapes behaviors, shapes our skills and knowledge. So I love that you look at that performance triad or triangle of those 3 elements. So if we're going to start to look at some of that stuff, or we're going to start to look at, okay, if I want to elevate my performance in various roles of my life, so at work or as a parent or as a spouse or as a friend or whatever, what are some of the things that like you would coach me on doing, or what are some of the steps that I can take?
I use a particular, very relatively unknown assessment tool that really leverages emotional intelligence, critical thinking, creative thinking, behavior tendencies, personality tendencies, and wraps it all up into one assessment that we actually call the MRI of the soul. What I find the most common revealing element where I start, and this is going to be kind of an interesting discussion, is candidness. How does a person score in their candidness? Now, you and I can sit here and talk and say, well, we're being very candid with each other about what we're doing or how we're going about something, but it's not about the candidness that everyone else sees. It's about the candidness that they don't see that we are aware of inside of our mind. Are we being candid with ourselves? It's that self-talk. And I know you've done other podcasts on this, and this is by far the Achilles heel of every leader, is that self-talk. because on the other side of this candidness is apprehension. So I will always start to work on that self-talk. And this is where these roles that we play in our life, where I use a process called structured journaling to help start this journey of taking a step each month in the positive direction in all the roles that you play, so that we can eliminate the head trash that we carry around in a day-to-day way of our mindset and our self-talk of why am I underperforming because I'm not doing the best as a mother, I'm not doing the best as a spouse or a father. Those is where we start.
I love it. You call it head trash because that's exactly what it is, right? We tell ourselves the most ridiculous crap. I mean, it really is trash. And this is the work that I sit in. So what are some of the questions like if you're going to have someone do a performance journal, if I'm going to start to reconcile that head trash, if I'm going to start to be more candid with myself, what are some of the things that I should be reflecting on or I should be paying attention to?
That's a great question, because here's what it boils down to. We all have an ideal. So let's pretend that we take, for instance, you're a spouse. So my ideal is I want to say, write for me how you ideally want to be seen, understood, revered as a spouse. Write the ideal definition of that. It could be, I want to be considered the best friend, the most open, honest, and completely present person in my spouse's life. So that's the ideal. But then they have to write a reality. They have to tell me, what is your reality though? And this is where it gets very emotional. The full revealing element of how intimate that they really want to be in this, but more importantly, where the hindrances. So that creates what we call the esteem gap. There's the ideal at the top, but then there's the reality that happens every day. That gap is the esteem gap. And all we're going to do is start to close that gap by taking an affirmation statement. Let's say, for instance, in your reality, you tell me, I'm not always present and hearing everything that my spouse chooses to share with me. Well, we can then flip that around by saying, I am always present and make myself completely aware of my spouse's concerns, my spouse's desires, my spouse's dreams, because this is the most important relationship in my life. So when they start to journal that, now there's another piece of this equation that I use, and I don't know if you're familiar with EMDR therapy, which is a lot used in the trauma therapy, but as someone is writing these statements, so we will create 2 to 3 positive affirmation statements per role that they play, that's just going to be one step towards the reality or the ideal that they have. But when they're writing this, you're listening to an EMDR therapy, audio therapy type of influence, so that is what's imprinting that into the brain and into your, frankly, your soul. So this is where the journey starts to transform the head trash and the mindset of the clutter that we have all in our life, all the roles that we play.
I love that. And again, we're recording this at the start of a new year. This is going to come out still towards the beginning of the new year, right? And so people are in this mindset. I hate New Year's resolutions. I think they're pointless. I think we just need to be intentional about how we live our life. And it's helpful to reflect on what didn't work for me. What did I learn from it? What do I want to evolve and change? What was great that I want to sustain or nurture or move forward, right? But I think that it can be so easy to kind of have this unrealistic view of who we want to be, whether it's from our work life or our personal life or our health or whatever it might be. And it is hard to look at current state and look at that gap. And so I love that you're taking that whole picture. And I also love that there's intentional, like, okay, if I was going to shift this narrative, what would that look like? So if I was going to do a journal, let's say it's my role as a mother or as a wife or as a leader or whatever. So I identify who I want to be. I identify where I currently am. I kind of start to rewrite, okay, what would closing that gap look like? Is this like a daily practice? You focus on one role at a time? Walk us through, like, what does this look like a little bit?
What I do is I have them, again, put the 6 roles down. They have 6 ideal statements, and then they may have 2 to 3 journaling affirmation statements per role. So you may end up probably between 10 to 12, 18 journal statements that all follow a pattern or a structure of I always because. And that's where, if you follow Cialdini's, the psychological influence of power, Cialdini's work in this whole area is what this structured journal statement comes from. And I always, because. You actually handwrite that, but the brain starts to process this. You're leveraging that mental processing with an EMDR audio stimulus just once a day. I always tell people, don't try to say you're going to do it every day of the week, because that's unrealistic. Start with 4 days out of the week. That's what I call the baseline. Start with your baseline of 4 days out of the week. And then if you want to shift it to 5, it's interesting. I will tell you, Rosie, my clients tell me, which I did this over 20 years ago for myself, if you skip a day, your brain is telling you, I need to go do that. That's what's the most phenomenal part of this exercise is your brain supports your behavior to do what you know you need to do.
I love that. And so as people build this practice, how long does it typically, I know everyone's different, but how long do you find it typically takes for someone if they have this regular practice, so they've identified their 6 roles, they're shifting that narrative of, I always, because, and closing the esteem gap. How long before people start to see differences?
I would say measurable difference within 2 weeks, but remarkable difference within 30 days.
So those people who are looking for like a quote unquote quick fix, here you go. You'll see something.
Yeah, I will tell you, if you follow the regimen of it, you will see measurable differences in 2 weeks and remarkable differences in 30 days.
I love that. I love it. And I can totally see where that would happen, because I think with the work that we do in a different way to help people shift that narrative, it takes some time, but with some deliberate practice, you do find it's amazing how pliable, right, our brains are. Like, we have that neuroplasticity. I think up until our 70th decade, like, we can still shift that mindset. We can lay down new neural pathways. We don't have to keep running off those crappy scripts, that head trash you talked about. And I think that's so critical. And people want to jump to other stuff, but the mindset's always going to hold you back. So I love that that's your starting point. So we're starting with self. So we're doing this practice because this is also looking at a workplace standpoint. When we talk about moving to extraordinary, how do you foster this type of idea of moving to extraordinary, of everybody showing up as a leader, of becoming the best version of themselves from a workplace standpoint? How do we start to shift the tide in 2024 and beyond?
Well, I think the first thing as a leader that we need to recognize, if we're going into, let's pretend we're going into a team meeting and we have a particular issue that we really have to deal with or resolve. And the first mindset of that leader is every single person in this room has a unique ability. They have a piece of a puzzle that's critical to the outcome that we're looking for. And it's my responsibility to elevate that person to believe in their unique ability and foster that unique ability into the solution that we're trying to achieve or the outcome we're trying to achieve. That's the first thing. And within themselves, they don't have all the answers. They have to accept the fact that I have a unique piece of this puzzle. I don't have all the answers. So really, when they walk in that room, say, you know what? Here's what I know about this challenge that we're having. But I know in this room, everybody, because of your experience, because of your perspective, because of your unique ability, and because of what you bring to this table, you have a critical part of this, and we need to discover how we as a team are going to resolve this. So that being said, there's no agenda here. There's no political power play in here. This is all, as I always say, is think of that scene in Apollo 13 when that engineer walked in that room and threw all the crap on the table and said, this is all we have on this capsule. We're going to fit that thing, that round thing, into this square hole, figure it out. But again, the motivation was because there were lives at stake. This is not the case maybe of this meeting, but there is the future of a company. There is the innovation status of a company, that the extraordinary status of that company that is at stake. And all we need to do is say, I don't have all the answers, but I do know this. This is what I know. I can contribute to this. Now let's wrestle around with that and come up with what we believe as a team is the next best move that we can make towards this ultimate objective that we have. What's the next best move?
I love that approach, and it aligns so well with what we know about innovation and about psychological safety, right? Psychological safety resides at that local team level, and it requires the formal leader of that team to create that space. And so often, I don't know about you, but I coach leaders that one of their self-limiting mindsets or that head trash is somehow that their value as a leader is by how much they know or that they have to have the answers or whatnot. And it's like, no, 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 no. You couldn't possibly. I was literally just having a conversation with someone earlier today that they said that people kept talking about how this pretty high up leader doesn't understand the nuances. And I'm like, that high up leader should not understand the nuances. What are you not conveying to that person? Or if there's a mismatch between the direction or the strategy and the capability or the functionality, why are you not having that dialogue? Because to expect that person to know everything is completely ridiculous. And I share that because I love the approach of, hey, I have this piece. And when you think about as a leader, what's coming to mind is one, do I actually know the gifts and talents of my team members? Meaning if I'm not meeting with them, if I'm not understanding what makes them tick, that, you know what, I know that their job description might say XYZ, but I know they have an interest in this. And is there an opportunity for a growth or stretch project that can elevate this? Or are there people who hide out on a team and are withholding because either out of fear or they don't feel valued? And so I think that everything you're saying is so critical because, again, going back to the rise of AI and who knows what else to come, we have to be able to enable the best out of people and where machines can't go. Like, what's the stuff that only humans can do where they feel valued and they feel they can contribute?
Totally. And I think if I could piggyback off of that, going into those one-on-one meetings is so critical to that leader, and especially as it relates to this moving to that extraordinary status. And it's really just being able to sit down and asking your staff member 4 key questions or 4 key areas, which is, what do you want? Number 1, what is it you're looking for? What do you ideally want to achieve here? Number 2, for me, what your life would be like or how you would feel if you were actually working in that realm. And then, what is it that we need to do right now to help you make those steps? On a scale of 1 to 10, how close to that ideal are you? And then what is the next step that I can help you with to go towards that? That starts to open up, like you said, that safe space to start being able to say, look, I believe in you. In fact, I probably believe in you more than you believe in yourself. That's another key piece of leadership.
I love those questions because they do open up that developmental piece. I mean, we get obviously brought in to do leadership development and team development, and there is a place for formal development, absolutely. And one of the things that I think gets missed is that, especially if you're a formal people leader, but even as a parent, you can think about this, that there are developmental moments or engageable or teachable moments all along the day that are missed opportunities if we think that, oh, it's, the training and development department or the culture department or whoever department it is, it's their job to train and develop my people. And then you always hear on surveys, there's no career growth or there's no development opportunity. Well, because are you having those moments or are you having those conversations? I mean, most of us know, like, if you are only having a quote unquote developmental conversation at your year-end performance review, which most people hate because they're pointless anyway, right? It's like, that's not helpful. But are you having that? Like, hey, how are you doing? Is there other stuff? You can also, I feel like, catch potential early signs of or risks of turnover too. Like, you find someone that they're not feeling stretched, they're not growing. But if you're taking an interest in this labor market, that's huge. And it says, I care about you as a person. I value you.
Well, I think that what we find is our communication dynamics is what is really being challenged. And it really goes back to a lot of the head trash, again, goes back to how we were raised. So I really help people understand their communication dynamics as a leader. If your listeners are familiar with Eric Berne, the games people played, and it's really about ego states, about the parent, adult, child ego states. And when we communicate, this is transactional analysis, meaning most of us were communicated by our parents from a critical parent. You should do this. You need to do this. That's the only communication pattern sometimes we as leaders understand in how to communicate with our subordinates and our team. But if you think about how does the person in your life, typically that grade school teacher, how did she communicate with you? As a nurturing parent, help me understand how I can help you with this, or help me understand why you feel that was important for you to do. That nurturing parent opens up that entire pathway to communication in a healthy way, and where the authenticity and that vulnerability space can open up. And that's where the true impact for a leader starts to take place.
Yeah, it's funny. So many, as you talk about the shoulds, I mean, it's like shame-based, right? A lot of us were raised with that. I think it's important for people listening. It does not matter whether you had what you consider to be a wonderfully functional, happy childhood, or your childhood was completely dysfunctional and traumatic, or anything in between. This is how our brains work. Like, we imprint this stuff from our parents, but also from our surroundings, from school, et cetera. And we are on high alert for the bad stuff. We are on high alert for the trash. And that's what gets imprinted, period. And maybe we don't realize it, but it's running the show until we do the work to clear it out.
Absolutely. I think that is the trend when we talk about becoming a better version of yourself, or, working through some of these communication and emotional dynamics, or the complete area around apprehension and candidness. All this stems around how we were brought up, how we were communicated with. And for us to break those bonds and to become a better version of ourselves, that does impact and influence your ability to affect the extraordinary.
100%. I love all this. And I love that you're giving us tangible, like, nuggets of things we can ask, questions we can ask, stuff we can do, which is fabulous. So I want to make sure before we ask another set of questions that we talk about this really cool new project that you are working on. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Because by the time this comes out, people are still going to have time to check it out.
Well, I will say talking about this gets me emotional, because this is a 12-year dream. This is something that goes back for 12 years. The working title is Success to Significance. I do a lot of work with private equity firms that are going in and buying family-owned companies. And I find that kind of the high net worth families, individuals, they come with a whole nother set of suite of challenges and dysfunction that a lot of us don't really realize. So the Success to Significance in its core purpose is to help heal families. And it's going to then help those families create and galvanize a legacy of that family that can have an impact on society through a philanthropic humanitarian effort. That is at its very core. What is its purpose? It's to heal a family and to help establish the legacy of that family. It's a 1-year program that has immersive experiences into communities around the United States and in other parts of the world. This all came out of because of a lot of my work within a not-for-profit out of Malawi, Africa, that they have a very strong community there that a CEO that I've coached with for over 12 years has established. So this immersive experience, it's about touching the heart and stirring the soul to open up these pathways of healing and establishing, again, this legacy.
I love that. I love the healing. There's so much healing that needs to happen in our world. I work with a lot of family-owned businesses, and any family-owned businesses that are listening, it's challenging to mix those two together, and there can be a lot that goes into that. So I love that you're helping this, and it's supposed to launch some point this year, right? So we'll have notes in the show notes for people who want to learn more, or if you think that there might be someone who's interested. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Thank you for actually bringing that up.
Yeah, I love that. We always want to promote good stuff that people are doing. All right, so we're going to go back. Speaking of head trash, so sorry, we're doing a 180. we're doing the boomerangs coming back, David. All right, so speaking of head trash, right, we were talking about how we all have this growing up. So no matter how much work we've done on ourselves, one of the things that I've learned, and part of my obsession of normalizing the messiness of being human, is that we all, to some extent, still get in our own way, and that head trash takes over, as you would call it. So what I would love, David, would you share what is a self-limiting story that you still tell yourself sometimes? And when it shows up, when that head trash tries to take over, how do you move beyond it so that you can still show up as a leader?
It's really about, am I approaching this from my current self, my past self, or my future self? Because to me, that is what helps me understand in challenging myself, am I doing the right thing for the right reasons? That's by keeping it out of the future self and out of the past self, but in the current self. So that's my self-living record is, am I speaking from one of the appropriate current self?
Gotcha. I like that perspective, right? Because a lot of times that self-limiting story is our past self trying to creep in to the present or trying to creep in. So humor me. If your past self is trying to hijack, is trying to take the wheel, what does it say? What are you wrestling with?
Oh my God, that's so ugly, Rosie. That's so ugly.
Well, see, I'm not letting you off the hook. That was a nice answer, but here we go.
Well, let's just put it this way. On the old disc profile, I'm a high D in recovery.
So you got some perfectionism. You got some what?
Well, it's that
productivity.
It's the demanding drive where there's a high body count behind it.
Got to get stuff done at all costs. Here we go.
Am I being empathetic in what I'm doing with where this person's situation is? That's the past self I have to watch out for, because I can steamroll over anybody and drive to what I want versus what being sensitive to what is important to them.
Got it. Well, you know what? You're not alone. So thank you for that. But this goes back to self-awareness, right? If we know that about ourselves, that if I don't pay attention to it, this is the version of me that can hijack me. I think that's critical, right? To remind ourselves that.
Absolutely.
So thank you for going there. It wouldn't be a good episode if I didn't make someone a little uncomfortable. So there we go. Are you ready for quick questions?
Let's do it.
All right. Fill in the blank. Living authentically is?
Currently living in my current self.
Love it. When the world is presenting an opening, but you don't feel like showing up as a leader, what do you do?
It's my why. It's why is it what I do? And it goes back to my history of not feeling I ever measured up, but more importantly, say, you know what? Everybody has a purpose and has the ability to have impact. And it's my responsibility to help a person be who they're called to be.
I love that. Anchoring on our why usually will never steer us wrong. So that's awesome. What is something people would be surprised to know about you?
As much of a high D as I am, I'm a very emotional person. On a stage, when I am in front of an audience, I'll probably be the first one to tear up. And believe me, I'd probably be the most uncomfortable in the room because of that, but not really. No, I am very much embrace my emotions, and I help other people, I think, feel comfortable with that vulnerability.
Well, I think that's awesome. And as a caveat, I will just say that, I don't know, a couple of years ago, that always sticks out in my mind. It was a podcast episode that Mark Brackett was doing with Brene Brown. And I can't remember who said what. It was probably Mark, but said that unfelt, unprocessed, unexpressed emotions are not benign. They will metastasize.
Yep.
And so I think being able to be comfortable with, we are emotional creatures, whether we think it or not. And Brene has another great quote that says, as leaders, we can either spend a reasonable amount of time tending to fears and feelings or squander an unreasonable amount of time dealing with problematic behavior. So I love that you model that. I love that you live that, because I think that, especially in today's day and age when things are so hectic and so many people are struggling, to pretend that people don't have emotions is really counterproductive and not.
And I think it's an exclamation point that my first coach told me, David, if you want your client to be vulnerable, you must be vulnerable first.
Mm-hmm. Model the way. Love it. All right. Your favorite go-to movie?
A Man for All Seasons.
Ooh, I don't know that one.
Oh, yeah. Sir Thomas More from back in the King Edward era, where he wanted Sir Thomas More, who was an attorney, to go to the Pope and grant him an annulment. And he stood by his principles and said, no, I can't do that.
Man for All Seasons. Okay. What's your go-to song?
Oh, it's got to be REO Speedwagon. Roll with the Changes.
That's a good one. I like that one. All right. What is something you can't live without?
To me, I think it's authentic, deep conversation.
Nice. What is something in your ordinary daily life that makes your heart happy?
My 6 grandkids.
Oh, I love that. What are the age ranges?
I guess Teddy's probably right now almost 6 to, I think Miles is about 6 months.
So they're youngins. I love it. I love it. I love it. That's awesome. And what are you grateful for right now?
I'm grateful to do what I do. I'm grateful to be blessed with the opportunity to change lives. That is the most humbling thing every day that I am so grateful for.
Love it. And you've got amazing tools and wisdom to do that. So I know that your clients probably would echo that you are transforming their lives. So I'm glad for that. So, closing question, David, if you could challenge leaders everywhere to practice this one behavior that would create more human workplaces and equip everyone to show up as a leader, what would that be?
You know, the story of Sir Edmund Hillary, when he finally ascended to Mount Everest, and then the first human being to get to the peak of Mount Everest, and then when he came down, this is the key. All the reporters asked him, how long has it been a goal for you to reach Mount Everest? And he said, that was never the goal. To think of reaching the summit of Mount Everest was too daunting. It was too overwhelming. But my goal was for every step I took was to overcome a demon inside of me. So it's every step that you take. It's what that path to the extraordinary. It's one step at a time. And each step is to challenge yourself to overcome a demon inside of you.
I love that because it makes it tangible, right? And not so overwhelming. So that's fantastic. Well, David, thank you for your humanity, your authenticity, all the wonderful wisdom and nuggets you gave me in this conversation, and truly for the work that you're doing in the world. I'm so appreciative of this time we got to spend together.
Oh, I enjoyed it too myself, Rosie. It's wonderful to talk with you.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to peopleforwardnetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.